So for many years, I have tried really hard to understand and to learn what it means to be labeled a Latina when I came to the United States. And then I struggled to understand and learn why there were so many disparities that perpetually affected people of color in this country. That became a really sharp in focus when I got married to a Haitian American and had two extraordinarily gorgeous, beautiful, talented Afro-Latina little girls that entered MCPS. But even before then, having to navigate what I knew were moments where they were perceived differently. And as a mother, there's nothing that you want more than to make sure that your children see themselves reflected in success and are loved no matter what. And so this has been a very long journey for me personally, because I have had to be very humble in learning so many different iterations of history and of present day issues that affect so many of us in this county and in this nation and in the world. And also prompted me to learn even more about the history of the Caribbean and Latin America, understanding that of the over 14 million slaves that were brought to the Americas, 400,000 were brought to the United States, but the rest went to the Caribbean and Latin America. The second largest recipient of slaves was Venezuela, where I was born and raised. And so there's another entire history and a lot of complexities around being somebody from the Caribbean or Latin America, and we all converge here in Montgomery County. And so when I was literally drafted to run for the Board of Education, and I began to look at data, and I began to question data, it was labeled as a troublemaker several times, I started realizing a pattern, right? You start recognizing a pattern. And then I had the opportunity to run for the county council and expanded my portfolio of policy from education to so many other issues. So housing, healthcare, economic attainment, all of those issues, access to transportation, all of those issues began again to manifest a pattern of disparities, persistent disparities that to this day continue. And I began to really, truly then reflect on the notion that if these were a result of structural policies and a history that had perpetuated this idea of having to grab onto power, then we needed to come together and put forth legislation, not a policy, legislation that then would be an instrument to begin to dismantle all of these persistent disparities. Because if we didn't do this, then unfortunately, I guess at this point my grandchildren, because my daughters are 27 and 22, but unfortunately we'll be here another 20, 30 years lamenting the same thing. And I have to also observe that sometimes we talk about our communities of color in Montgomery County as if they just got here. You know that of the 5 councilmanic district, 4 are majority of color. So in reality, this is who we are. And so whether this is a fiscal responsibility legislation, because if we don't know that our resources are being invested in ways that begin to address those disparities, then it is a fiscal responsibility issue, because then we're spending money without knowing if we're getting the return on investment or addressing the issues that we need. If we don't realize that this has a major impact in our economic viability, our economic development, this is an economic imperative issue, because the majority of those children going through Montgomery County public schools are of color and they're not doing so well. So what about our workforce development? What about the health of our communities? That has an impact also on the bottom line. So for those people who keep trolling my Facebook, I say that as a taxpayer, you should really want to support this legislation. I also say to you that as a nation, this is very connected, because the same patterns and the same reasons why we need to do this really, truly are very much relevant to what's happening to this country and also to the world. So I tend to really think in those levels, and I wanted to hurry up and do this, but after having really awesome conversations with so many that have done this before, including Matias Valenzuela in King County, Washington State, and realizing that this takes time, and I know Mark spoke about Fairfax County, the same thing in King County. It took them 10 years because the elected leadership wouldn't go along. And I do want to ask for another round of applause for everybody standing here. Seriously, because can you imagine if we had to deal with elected leaders that just didn't get it, and then year after year after year of struggle, they just wouldn't get it? That was not the case here. We were deliberate, we were methodical, and we delivered. And I want to thank everyone who participated in all these community conversations, over 1,000 people, plus the toolkit that we publish in English and Spanish, and thank you MCPS for helping us with that, and everybody who came to testify. I want to thank all of you, all the organizations, everybody who hung in there. I know there were moments that were like, what's going on? Where's the legislation? Everybody knew that we had to be deliberate. Dr. Elaine Bonner-Tompkins, thank you so much for your expertise. I was so fortunate to feel like I had a resource right there, an asset that knew what we needed to get to, and she did. I mean, she was there really helping us along. Tiffany Ward for helping to manage this process. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, girl. I want to thank my staff because I have no idea how they stayed with me this year. They are incredible, and Berta Cersosimo is here representing because some of my staff are dealing with some family issues. I want to acknowledge them. Roland Nicoloa, I want to acknowledge Craig Wilson and Mayra Cruz Solis. Berta for always sticking there, doing everything. Really, really do appreciate it. I want to thank you. And I want to thank Bob Drummer for drafting the legislation and really putting it into a format that made sense. But above all, I want to thank County Executive Mark Elridge for trusting also this process and being there and every step of the way, whether it was we need to join GARE, there he was, and we need to do this, there he was, and working, with the legislation. That's what it takes. That's how these things happen. So thank you so much for everything. And this is an instrument. This is an instrument that we are going to be able to use. And again, for me, it's not lost on me that, as an immigrant, as a woman, as the mother of these amazing, two daughters, this is personal in the sense that I feel like now I can turn around to them and hopefully they understand the significance and say, we in Montgomery County walk the walk. We don't shy away. We face hate front on, head on, and we always try to do the best that we can to make this a better place to live. So thank you so much, everybody.